I don't remember when the snow started falling. It was just a light flurry at first, soft and almost silent, like powdered sugar drifting through the air. I had gotten off the bus 2 stops early to buy something for dinner, planning to stop by the supermarket after visiting Caleb's grave. It was his birthday. I could not go. My feet had taken me there before my mind could say no. I was nearly 9 months pregnant, and looking back, it was an incredibly stupid decision. But when your heart is split in half, logic doesn't always win. By the time I left the cemetery, the soft flurries had turned into a white wall. The wind was howling like it was angry at the world, cutting through my thin coat like knives. I wrapped my scarf tighter and tried to keep walking, but every gust pushed harder, and the snow felt heavier with each step. My boots were soaked through. I could barely see the road. I had no idea how far I was from the main street anymore. I kept telling myself, just a few more blocks, just keep going, Grace. Then the pain hit me, sharp, low, spreading like fire through my back and across my belly. I stopped in my tracks and hunched forward. No, no, not now, I whispered through clenched teeth. My hand gripped the edge of a street lamp for balance. I waited, hoped it was just a cramp, but then it came again, stronger this time. My fingers trembled as they reached into my coat pocket, searching for my phone. It wasn't there. I froze, breath catching in my throat. I'd left it on the kitchen counter. Of course I had. Panic set in. I tried waving to the few figures in the distance, but they kept walking, heads down, wrapped in their own worries and winter coats. I crossed the street and rang the buzzer to an apartment building, any unit I could reach. I pressed buttons randomly, desperately. Please, someone help, I cried out. I'm in labor, I need help, please. A man's voice finally answered, calm and unsure. Just a moment. I'll open, but then I heard her. A woman's voice, sharp and cruel. Don't you dare. We don't need problems. Normal people stay inside in this weather. She's probably homeless or high. The line went dead. That's when I started crying. Not delicate tears, real sobs. Heavy and hot against the cold air. My legs were shaking. The pain wouldn't stop now. I stumbled toward another building, dragged myself up 2 steps to a tiny covered porch, and collapsed against the doorframe. I could hardly feel my hands. My knees buckled. I was sinking. I don't know how long I sat there, shaking, crying, whispering prayers I hadn't said since I was a child. I thought I was going to die. Truly. And then the door opened. An older man stood in the doorway, thin and pale, wrapped in a coat thrown over a shirt like he hadn't even had time to dress properly. His silver hair was tousled, and his face looked just as shocked as mine felt. "Dear God, you're pregnant," he gasped. "Come in, quick. Come inside before you freeze." I tried to speak, but could only cry out again as another wave of pain hit me. He reached out, gently but firmly, guiding me through the door, his hands surprisingly steady. I looked into his eyes filled with concern and something else, something heavy. And then everything went black. I woke to the smell of something sharp and stinging. Ammonia, maybe, and the sound of a voice speaking gently but with urgency. "Breathe. That's it, come back now. You fainted, but you're safe." My eyes fluttered open to a dim hallway lit by a single lamp. I was lying on a folded blanket, propped up against the wall. The same man from before, kind eyes, weathered face, knelt beside me. "Where am I?" I mumbled, my voice hoarse. "You're in my apartment," he said. "Name's Harold. Harold Whitmore. I live alone, ground floor. You were freezing out there. I called for an ambulance, but with this storm, they said it'll be at least an hour, maybe more." I blinked slowly. The contractions hadn't stopped. They were getting worse. I could feel them tightening like a vice around my core. I winced. I'm having the baby. I can't wait that long," Harold nodded, already gathering supplies, towels, a plastic basin of warm water, something that looked like an old bedsheet. "I figured as much," he said. "I've never done this before, but I used to be a doctor a long time ago. I remember some things. And right now, we don't have time to hesitate. You used to be a doctor? I asked, trying to sit up. He glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Pain. Regret. Then he forced a smile. Retired. It's been years, but I can still follow the basics. And I promise, I'll help you through this. My breath caught again as another contraction hit, and I cried out, gripping the blanket beneath me. It hurts. Oh God, it hurts. I know, he said, kneeling beside me again. But you're doing great. You're strong. What's your name? Grace, I whispered. Grace Miller. All right, Grace. I'm going to need you to stay with me, okay? Focus on my voice. He pressed the back of his hand against my forehead. You're burning up. When's your due date? 2 weeks from now, I groaned. I wasn't. I didn't plan any of this. I just went to the cemetery. Today's my husband's birthday. Harold paused. Your husband? Caleb. He died in a construction accident a month ago. I live in a housing dorm now. It's cold, moldy, but it's all I could afford. I was just coming back from visiting him when the storm hit. He didn't speak right away, just nodded slowly and covered my legs with a fresh towel. I'm sorry for your loss. Another wave of pain surged through me, and I cried out again. All right, Grace. We don't have much time. I'm going to help you deliver this baby right here. But I need you to trust me. When I say breathe, you breathe. When I say push, you push. Can you do that? I looked at him, this stranger who had every reason to close the door and turn away, and I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Yes, please help me. I will, he said softly. You're not alone anymore. The pain was unbearable. It came in waves, sharper and faster, giving me barely a moment to breathe. I screamed into the towel Harold had placed beneath my head, my hands gripping the edge of his couch, my body trembling from the cold, from the fear, from the sheer weight of what was happening. Every nerve in me was on fire. I had never felt so completely consumed by something I couldn't stop or control. Harold knelt between my legs, calm but focused, guiding me with his voice. You're doing great, Grace. You're so close now. One more push, just like that. Deep breath, now push again. I sobbed through gritted teeth, gave everything I had left in me, and then suddenly there was release. A second passed, then another, and then I heard it, the sharp, sudden wail of a newborn boy. Harold had him in his hands, wrapped in a clean towel, his face flushed with both effort and awe. He gave the baby a gentle rub and a pat, and the tiny lungs cried louder, as if demanding the whole world pay attention. Oh my God, I whispered, tears flooding my eyes. Is he okay? Harold nodded, smiling for the first time. He's perfect. He moved quickly, cleaning the baby with practiced hands, checking his breathing, wrapping him up tight. He handed him to me, his voice suddenly gentle. Try feeding him. Even if your milk hasn't come in yet, the contact helps. I cradled my son against my chest, his tiny mouth searching instinctively. He latched on, and my heart nearly burst. His skin was warm. His fingers curled around my hospital bracelet. He was here, alive. The sirens pierced the air outside. Then doors slammed, footsteps rushed. The EMTs finally arrived, bundled in winter gear, brushing snow from their shoulders as they entered the apartment. One of them, a young paramedic, froze when he saw the scene. Wait, did he just deliver the baby? Harold stood and wiped his hands on a towel. There wasn't time to wait. The paramedic looked stunned. Sir, that was incredibly well done. Are you medical? Harold hesitated. Retired. Long time ago. But the second medic, a man in his 40s, stepped closer, narrowing his eyes. Hold on. I know you. You're Dr. Harold Whitmore, the cardiac surgeon from Phoenix General. You operated on my niece 8 years ago. You saved her life. Harold waved him off. You must be mistaken. No, the man insisted. You're him. I remember. My sister has your name framed on her mantle. Harold gave a faint smile but said nothing more. They helped me onto a stretcher, bundled the baby in my arms, and prepared to take us both to the hospital. As they rolled me toward the door, I looked back at Harold, this stranger who had saved me, who had given my son life. Thank you, I said, my voice trembling. I don't have the words, but I want you to know. I'm naming him after you. He blinked, startled. What? Freddie, I said softly. Freddie Miller. It's short for Frederick, right? He smiled, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or something older, heavier, being lifted. Take care of him, Grace, he said. He's already lucky to have you. No, I whispered. We're the lucky ones. The days after Freddie's birth blurred together in a soft, sterile haze of hospital lights, swaddled blankets, and hourly checkups. I was exhausted, but filled with a kind of peace I hadn't known in months. Freddie was quiet, alert, and healthy. Every time he grasped my finger or snuggled into my chest, I felt like I had been given a second chance at life, not just him, but me too. Harold came to visit the very next morning. He brought a bag stuffed with diapers, baby bottles, a tiny blue onesie, and a winter coat I hadn't asked for. He looked uncomfortable carrying it all, like he wasn't sure if he was crossing a line. But when I saw his silhouette in the doorway, I smiled like I was seeing family. I thought you could use a few things, he said gruffly, avoiding eye contact. Wasn't sure what size to get, so I asked the pharmacist. I reached for his hand and squeezed it. Thank you. You didn't have to. I know, he said. That's why I did. The nurse who let him in whispered to me later that she recognized his name. That man, she said, used to be someone big, a top heart surgeon from Phoenix. Saved hundreds of lives. What's he doing living alone up here? I didn't know the full story then, but over the next few days, I learned pieces of it, little by little, as Harold lingered at the edge of the room, holding Freddie with the tenderness of someone who had once held a child of his own. One afternoon, I asked, gently, "Do you have children?" He didn't answer at first, just stared out the window at the snow, his jaw tightening. "I had a son," he finally said. "Daniel. My wife, Margaret, too. She was an anesthesiologist. We worked together for years, same hospital. What happened?" I asked, but carefully, not pushing. He took a long breath. "We were at a cabin one winter. I got called back for emergency surgery. I thought it would be quick. That night, the wiring in the cabin caught fire. By the time the firefighters got there, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I didn't believe it," he said. "Not at first. I kept cooking breakfast for them, talking to them like they were still there. Then I started drinking. Lost the house. Quit the hospital. I didn't want anyone looking at me like I was broken. And I was broken." I swallowed the lump in my throat. He wasn't telling me for pity. He was telling me because somewhere between my contractions and Freddie's first cry, something inside him had shifted. And now? I asked quietly. He looked over at Freddie, who was sleeping in my arms. "Now I try to do what I can. I stopped drinking a year ago. Had a dream about Margaret and Daniel. Margaret was scolding me like she used to. Told me I had someone left to live for, even if I didn't know it yet. I didn't speak for a long time. I just reached over and placed Freddie in his arms. "You can hold him any time," I said. "You're part of this, whether you want it to be or not." Harold's voice was barely audible. Maybe you two shouldn't be going back to that dorm room. That place isn't fit for a baby. I've got a spare room. Clean. Warm. If you want, you and Freddie could stay, just until you get on your feet." I didn't hesitate. We'd be honored. Moving into Harold's apartment felt strange at first, like stepping into someone else's quiet, unfinished chapter. The building was old but sturdy, and his place had the lived-in scent of worn leather, chamomile tea, and something faintly like dust-covered books. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, and after the cold silence of my dorm room, That warmth felt like a hug I didn't know I needed. He cleared out the guest room in a single day, brought in a space heater, found an old rocking chair from storage, even borrowed a bassinet from a neighbor down the hall. "No need to buy anything new just yet," he said. "Babies grow faster than weeds." At first, I tiptoed through the space, unsure of my presence. I asked permission to use the stove, apologized every time Freddie cried. I folded the towels a dozen times just to feel useful. But Harold never made me feel like a guest. He started calling Freddie the little guy and me kiddo, like we'd all been thrown into the same story and were just trying to write the next page together. He had a cat, Shadow, a black fur ball with bright yellow eyes and the quiet personality of a wise old man. Shadow took to Freddie right away, curled up at the foot of his crib and purred like he was singing lullabies only the baby could understand. We found a rhythm. I cooked, he cleaned. I rocked Freddie to sleep. He changed diapers when I was too tired to move. Some nights, we watched old westerns on his dusty VHS player while Freddie slept on my chest. For the first time since Caleb died, I didn't dread waking up. But it wasn't perfect. I began noticing things. It started with the pills. A bottle tucked behind the sugar jar. Another in the drawer beside the remote. Painkillers. Not the over-the-counter kind, either. Then there were the moments he thought I wasn't looking. When he'd press his fingers to his temples, gripping the armrest of the couch until his knuckles turned white. Sometimes he'd stand in the kitchen, blinking hard, swaying slightly like he was trying to blink away a migraine that wouldn't leave. "Are you okay?" I asked one morning when I caught him wincing as he reached for a pan. He waved it off with a crooked smile. "Old age. Nothing ibuprofen can't handle." "But those aren't ibuprofen," I said gently. He didn't answer right away, just poured himself some tea and changed the subject, asking whether Freddie had smiled yet. I let it go for the moment, but something in my gut told me there was more to Harold Whitmore than faded diplomas and old losses. Something deeper. Something he didn't want me to see. Not yet. It happened on a quiet afternoon, the kind of day where Freddie was napping and the snow outside made everything feel softer, slower. I decided to do some cleaning, real cleaning, the kind that lets you feel like you're helping even when your life is still in pieces. Harold had asked me not to worry about the back closet, but curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I was just looking for more baby blankets or an old heater we could plug in for Freddie's room. But what I found was a box. It was tucked behind an old suitcase and wrapped in a flannel sheet. Inside were neatly stacked papers, faded greeting cards, and photographs. One photo caught my eye, an 8x10 framed in simple blackwood, wrapped in an old pillowcase like someone couldn't quite bear to throw it out, but also couldn't stand to look at it every day. The boy in the photo was maybe 20, with dark hair parted on the side and eyes that held a quiet warmth. He was standing next to a woman who could only be Harold's late wife. Same gentle smile, same posture. But it was the boy who made my breath catch, because I knew that face. Liam Green. He had been Caleb's closest friend. He came by often, quiet, respectful, always the one who stayed behind to help clean up after dinners. I hadn't seen him since Caleb's funeral, but I could still picture him standing silently at the edge of the service, hands folded, eyes red. And now here he was in a photo from decades ago, or someone who looked exactly like him. I brought the frame to Harold, my hands shaking slightly. "Harold, who is this?" He looked up from the newspaper, took one glance and froze. His face went pale. "That's Daniel," he said quietly. "My son." "He looks exactly like someone I know," I whispered. "Someone who was close to Caleb. His name is Liam Green. But Harold, the resemblance is unreal." He didn't speak for a long time. His eyes stayed on the photo, unmoving. Finally, he said, "Margaret, my wife, she gave birth to twins." I blinked. "Twins?" He nodded slowly. It was a complicated delivery. We were told one of the babies didn't survive. Daniel was the one who lived. We buried the other, Or at least we believed we did. The room felt suddenly smaller. My skin tingled. Are you saying? I don't know, he murmured. I never questioned it. Margaret was too broken to press for answers. I handled the funeral arrangements myself. We grieved, and then we tried to move forward. I sat down across from him, still gripping the frame. But Harold, if Liam is that second child, your other son, then something terrible happened in that hospital. Some kind of switch, or... He looked up at me, his eyes wide, haunted. I thought that pain was buried forever. I never imagined there could still be more to the story. We sat in silence for a long time, the photograph between us, and for the first time since moving in, I saw something in Harold I hadn't before. Hope. Flickering, but real. It took me 2 days to find Liam. I went through Caleb's old contacts, messaged a few mutual friends, and finally tracked down a number that still worked. My hands were trembling when I texted him, Liam, it's Grace. Something important came up. I need to see you. It's about Caleb and about someone else. He responded within an hour. Simple, curious, but kind as always. Of course. Tell me when and where. When he arrived at the apartment, the air felt heavier. I hadn't told Harold yet. I wanted to be sure. Liam stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat, and smiled gently when he saw Freddie asleep in my arms. I didn't even know you were pregnant, he said. Is he? Caleb's? I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. Yeah, this is Freddie. His eyes softened, then looked past me to Harold, who stood by the hallway, quiet and watchful. Liam, I said, setting the baby down gently in his bassinet. There's something I need to show you. I handed him the photograph. He took it, stared at it, then blinked and took a step back. What the hell? He whispered. That's Daniel, Harold said, stepping forward. My son. Liam looked between the two of us, then back at the photo. But this is me. This looks exactly like me. Harold's voice was calm but full of weight. My wife gave birth to twins. We were told one died during labor. But looking at you now, I'm not so sure. Liam didn't laugh, didn't argue. He just stood there, stunned, staring at the face in the photo like it had reached out and punched him in the chest. I was raised by a single mother, he said slowly. She never talked about my father, said he wasn't around, but I have a birth certificate. I'm not adopted. Still, I said gently, something feels wrong, and we want to know the truth. That night, Harold made a call. I overheard it from the kitchen, a voice he hadn't used before, firm, sharp, precise. When he hung up, he turned to me. Old friend, he explained. Pavel used to be a homicide detective, now runs his own private agency. He owes me a favor. Within 3 days, Pavel showed up. A large man in a wool coat, carrying a briefcase and the weight of decades in law enforcement. He didn't ask many questions, just took the photo, nodded once and said, We'll start with DNA. If that doesn't tell us anything, I'll dig into hospital records. 2 weeks later, the results came in. Liam was Harold's biological son. The silence in the living room that day was unlike any other. Liam sat on the couch, hands folded, staring at the folder in front of him. Harold stood across the room, gripping the back of the armchair like it was the only thing holding him up. Pavel's voice was quiet. There was a nurse, friends with Liam's mother. The records suggest she falsified the death certificate after one of the babies died in the next room. Switched the tags. The woman couldn't have children again. She begged for help. The nurse, she helped. Liam didn't speak at first. He just looked at Harold. Really looked, and I could see it happen. That shift. Recognition not of the face, but of the presence. He stood, walked over. His voice cracked. Hi, Dad. Harold didn't cry. Not really. But his eyes brimmed with something deeper than tears. He pulled Liam into an embrace, so tight it seemed like he was trying to hold on to time itself. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I never knew. I didn't either, Liam said, voice breaking. But I do now. We barely had time to breathe in the relief of reunion before Harold collapsed. 1 minute he was laughing, really laughing, as Liam told him some story from his childhood, and the next he staggered, clutched his head, and crumpled to the floor. Liam caught him before he hit the hardwood. Dad, can you hear me? His voice cracked, panicked. I was already dialing 911, heart racing, hands shaking. Freddie started crying in his bassinet, sensing the fear that gripped the room. The moment the ambulance arrived, everything became a blur. Sirens, flashing lights, the cold Arizona wind as we followed the stretcher out into the snow. At the hospital, we waited for what felt like hours. Finally, a doctor with tired eyes and a clipboard approached us. He has a cerebral aneurysm, the doctor said. It ruptured. We were able to stabilize him, but he needs emergency surgery. Soon. The longer we wait, the worse his chances. Liam stepped forward. Do it. Whatever it takes. The doctor paused. The operation is high risk. And the cost, well, you should be prepared. It won't be cheap. How much? I asked. He told us the number, and I remember my legs nearly giving out. Liam didn't hesitate. I'll sell the truck, he said. It's not worth his life. And I'll talk to the college, I added. Maybe they'll buy out my dorm lease early. It's not much, but no, Liam cut in firm. We'll handle it. Together. He sold the truck the next day. Every penny of it poured straight into the hospital's hands. I emptied what little I had in my bank account. We didn't care. Not about the money. Not about the sacrifice. Only about Harold. The surgery took 7 hours. I sat curled in the waiting room chair, arms wrapped around Freddie, whispering prayers I hadn't said in years. Liam paced the hallway like a caged animal. Neither of us spoke much. There was nothing left to say. When the surgeon finally emerged, we rose in unison. He made it, he said, but it was close. He's in a coma now. Stable, but we don't know when or if he'll wake up. It was supposed to be good news, but I felt like the ground had dropped beneath us. Freddie whimpered in my arms, and I held him tighter. 4 days, Harold lay motionless in the ICU bed, surrounded by wires and beeping machines. Liam visited every morning, sitting quietly, sometimes reading aloud. I came in the evenings after classes and my part-time shifts, always with Freddie. They wouldn't allow children into the ICU. But one night, I slipped past the nurse station with Freddie wrapped tightly in a soft blanket, whispering that we were just going for a late feeding. I pressed his tiny hand to Harold's cold fingers. Freddie, I whispered, this is the man who saved you, who saved both of us. Freddie let out a soft coo, then another. Then he said his first real word, quiet, garbled, but clear enough that I froze in place. Hi, it wasn't perfect, just a syllable. But in that sterile room, it felt like thunder. I looked up at Harold's face. Nothing. Then his eyelashes twitched. I leaned in. Harold, can you hear us? His eyes fluttered again. Then, slowly, painfully, they opened. He stared up at the ceiling first, then turned his gaze toward the crib in my arms. A breath. Then a whisper. Freddie, I broke down, clutching his hand. You're back. You made it. His voice was barely audible. Didn't want to miss him growing up. Liam arrived minutes later, skidding into the room and gripping his father's other hand. You stubborn old man. He choked out, laughing through tears. You scared the hell out of us. Harold smiled faintly. Not going anywhere yet. And for the first time in weeks, hope returned, fragile, flickering, but real. The room was dim and quiet, lit only by the faint blue glow of the monitors that traced each fragile beat of Harold's heart. Snow tapped softly against the hospital window, and Freddie's tiny breaths rose and fell beside me in the crib we'd set next to Harold's bed. It had become our ritual, Freddie and I visiting every evening, hoping he'd somehow feel us there. I pulled my chair closer and leaned in, gently lifting Freddie into my arms. He was growing fast, his cheeks fuller, his eyes brighter. But tonight he was calm, unusually so, as if sensing something different in the air. I laid his little hand over Harold's. "Say hi to Grandpa," I whispered, not expecting anything. Freddie blinked, looked at Harold, and then, as clear as day, said, "Grandpa." My heart stopped. I turned to Harold, his eyelids twitched. "Harold," I whispered, barely daring to breathe. Another flicker. Then, slowly, his fingers moved, just barely curling around Freddie's hand. The monitor next to us beeped louder, steadier. One of the lines began to rise with more purpose. I jumped to press the call button, eyes glued to his face. He groaned, soft but real. 2 nurses rushed in. One gasped, "He's responding." "He's waking up," the other said, already paging the doctor. Freddie giggled, a tiny, delighted sound that echoed through the sterile room like a melody. I held Harold's hand tight as his eyes blinked open, unfocused at first, then slowly turning toward the sound of Freddie's laughter. His lips parted. "Grace," tears welled in my eyes. "I'm here. We're here." "Freddie," he croaked, voice dry and broken, but filled with something I hadn't heard in months, hope. The doctor arrived moments later, flipping through his chart, murmuring to the nurses. "This is remarkable," he said. "His vitals are stabilizing. I've never seen such a rapid shift in post-op recovery." I didn't care about the science. I cared about that flicker in his gaze, that spark of life returning to a man who'd once given up on living. I texted Liam. 5 minutes later, he burst into the room, hair windswept, eyes wide. "Dad." Harold turned his head, slowly. A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Liam!" Liam rushed to the bed, gripping his father's hand. "You scared the hell out of us." Harold tried to chuckle, but it came out as a cough. "Guess I needed a reminder that I'm not alone anymore." He looked at me, then at Freddie, then back at Liam. I thought after everything I lost, that was it. No reason to stay. But now his eyes shimmered. Now I have a family again. I felt my throat tighten. There was something in his voice, something that hadn't been there before. Not even when we first met. It wasn't just gratitude or even joy. It was desire. Desire to live. To be part of something again. I leaned in close. "You're not just back. You're needed. We're not whole without you." Freddie cooed again, resting his head against my chest. Harold closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his cheek. "Then I'll stay," he whispered. "As long as I can. I'll stay." And in that moment, the snow outside seemed softer, less relentless. As if the world, just for tonight, had paused to let a broken man begin again. The snow had melted into soft puddles by the time Harold came home. Spring had quietly arrived in Flagstaff, the kind of gentle change you only noticed when life finally slowed down enough to feel it. Liam and I helped him up the front steps of the little cabin, his pace slower but steadier than we'd feared. Shadow, the black cat, meowed from the windowsill like he'd been waiting forever. Freddie squealed in my arms. Harold smiled. Now that's the kind of welcome a man wants. Inside, everything felt the same, yet different. The fire still crackled in the hearth, the old pine floors creaked, just as they always had, and Harold's favorite chair still sat by the window where the sunlight touched his shoulder just right in the mornings. But there was warmth now that didn't come from the heat. There was laughter in the kitchen. There was music from Liam's playlist, drifting softly from the living room. There was a baby, my baby, reaching out to a man he now called Grandpa without hesitation. We weren't perfect, but we were real. At night, when the world quieted down, I'd catch Liam watching me from across the room. Not in a way that made me nervous, but with a kind of gentleness I wasn't used to. Like he wasn't sure if he had the right to feel something new after everything we'd been through. And maybe I wasn't sure either. So we danced around it for weeks. Until one afternoon, as I folded baby clothes by the window, Harold sat beside me and said, "You remind me of my wife." I paused, half smiling. She must have been kind. "She was," he said, voice thick. "But what I remember most was how she chose love. Every single day. even after loss, especially after loss. I didn't say anything. He reached over and touched my hand. Don't live in the shadow of the past, Grace. That's no place to raise a child or build a future. Choose the present. It's all we ever really have. The next day, Liam took Freddie for a walk in the woods behind the house. When he came back, his cheeks were pink from the cold, and he had pine needles in his hair. He handed me a small white flower he'd picked from the edge of the trail. "I'm in love with you," he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't practiced. It just was. I looked at Freddie, who had fallen asleep in Liam's arms. Then at Harold, who pretended to be engrossed in a crossword puzzle by the fireplace. And I said, I know. Me too. No tears. No grand declarations. Just two people who had both lost everything, standing at the edge of something new. That night, we sat by the fire, the four of us. Harold with Shadow curled up on his lap, Liam holding Freddie, and me nestled close between them. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. Sometimes the loudest healing happens in silence. Sometimes family isn't about blood or history or even time. Sometimes it's a choice you make again and again. And as I watched Harold close his eyes with a contented sigh, Freddie dreaming peacefully in his father's arms, I realized something. This wasn't the life I expected. It was better, because somehow, in the middle of a snowstorm, I had found my way home.